Tonight, the valley feels aware, not in movement, not in sound, but in presence. Through every quiet chapter before this one, something has been gathering, not strength, not noise, understanding. The wilderness has watched every step, felt every hesitation, carried every unspoken word, and now it begins to respond. Welcome back to the Three Rivers country. If you have traveled through the earlier parts, you may sense that this is no longer only a journey outward into forests and rivers and silence. It has become a journey inward, into patience, into restraint, into the weight of choice. If this is your first night here, you have arrived at a moment of reflection. You do not need to remember every path behind us. Before we continue, take one slow breath in and let it follow away gently. Let your shoulders grow heavier. Let your shoulders grow heavier. Let your shoulders grow heavier. Only the slow rhythm of the valley, only the steady unfolding of consequence. The silence begins to answer, not loudly, not dramatically, but truthfully. And truth in the wilderness is rarely spoken twice. So allow the story to move at its own pace. Allow your thoughts to soften. Allow sleep to arrive whenever it chooses. Now, we return to the Valley of Silent Men, Part 7. Ahead of them was a chaotic pit of gloom, a sea of blackness, and in the heart of that sea he saw a light. He knew that it was a lamp in one of Ketsti's windows, and that Maret was guiding herself by that light when she started down the slope with her hand still in his. That she had made no effort to withdraw it made him unconscious of the almost drowning discomfort of the fresh deluge of rain that beat their faces. One of her fingers had cricked itself convulsively about his thumb, like a child afraid of falling, and each time the thunder crashed, that soft hold on his thumb tightened, and Kent's soul acclaimed. They drew swiftly nearer to the light, for it was not far from the knoll to Ketsta's place. Kent's mind leaped ahead. A little west by north from the inspector's bungalow was Kim's bayou, and it was undoubtedly to the forest trail over which she had gone at least once before, on the night of the mysterious assault upon Mui, that Maret was leading him. Questions began to rush upon him now, immediate demanding questions. They were going to the river. They must be going to the river. It was the quickest and surest way of escape. Had Maret prepared for that? And was she going with him? He had no time to answer. Their feet struck a gravel path leading to the door of Ketsti's place, and straight up this path the girl turned, straight toward the light blazing in the window. Then, to his amazement, he heard in the sweep of storm her voice crying out in glad triumph, "We are home, home." Hal's breath came in a sudden gulp. He was more than astounded. He was shocked. Was she mad, or playing an amazingly improper joke? She had freed him from a cell to lead him to the home of the inspector of police, the deadliest enemy the world now held for him. He stopped, and Maret Radisson tugged at his hand, pulling him after her, insisting that he follow. She was clutching his thumb, as though she thought he might attempt to escape. "'Tis safe, Monsieur James," she cried. "Do not be afraid." Monsieur James and the laughing note of mockery in her voice. He rallied himself and followed her up the 3 steps to the door. Her hand found the latch. The door opened, and swiftly they were inside. The lamp in the window was close to them, but for a space he could not see because of the water in his eyes. He blinked it out, drew a hand across his face, and looked at Marette. She stood 3 or 4 paces from him. Her face was very white, as she was panting as if hard run for breath, but her eyes were shining as she was smiling at him. The water was running from her in streams. "You are wet," she said, "and I'm afraid you will catch cold. Come with me." Again she was making fun of him, just as she had made fun of Emma Cardigans. She turned, and he ran upstairs behind her. At the top she waited for him. As he came up, she reached out her hand, as if apologizing for having taken it from him when they entered the bungalow. He held it keken as she led him down the hall to a door farthest from the stair. This she opened, and they entered. It was dark inside, and the girl withdrew her hand again, and Kent heard her moving across the room. In that darkness, a new and thrilling emotion possessed him. The air he was breathing was not the air he had breathed in the hall. In it was the sweet scent of flowers and of something else, the faint and intangible perfume of a woman's room. He waited, staring. His eyes were wide, when a match leaped into flame in Marette's fingers. Then he stood in the glow of a lamp. He continued to stare in the stupidity of a shock to which he was not accustomed. Marette, as if to give him time to acquaint himself with his environment, was taking off her raincoat. Under it, her slim little figure was dry, except where the water had run down from her uncovered head to her shoulders. He noticed that she wore a short skirt and boots, adorably small boots, of splendidly worked caribou, and then suddenly she came toward him, with both hands reaching out to him. "Please shake hands and say you are glad," she said. "Do not look so frightened. This is my room, and you are safe here." He held her hands tight, staring into the wonderful violet eyes that were looking at him with the frank and unembarrassed directness of a child's. I do not understand," he struggled. "Marette, where is Kedsty? He should be returning very soon. And he knows you are here, of course." She nodded. "I have been here for a month." Kent's hands closed tighter about hers. I do not understand," he repeated. "Tonight Kedsty will know that it was you who rescued me, and you who shot Constable Willis. Good God, we must lose no time in getting away. There is great reason why Kedsty dare not betray my presence in his house," she said quietly. "He would die first, and he will not suspect that I have brought you to my room, that an escaped murderer is hiding under the very roof of the Inspector of Police. They will search for you everywhere but here. Is not it splendid? He planned it all, every move, even to the screaming in front of your cell. You mean Kedsty." She withdrew her hands and stepped back from him, and again He saw in her eyes flash the fire that had come into them when she leveled her gun at the 3 men in the prison alcove. No, not Kedsty. He would hang you, and he would kill me if he dared. I mean that great, big, funny-looking friend of yours, Monsieur Fingers. Chapter 14. The manner in which Kent stared at Mariette Radisson after her announcement that it was Dirty Fingers who had planned his escape must have been, he thought afterward, little less an imbecile. He had wronged Fingers, he believed. He had called him a coward and a backslider. In his mind, he had reviled him for helping to raise his hopes to the highest pitch, only to smash them in the end. And all the time, Dirty Fingers had been planning this. Kent began to grin. The thing was clear in a moment. That is, the immediate situation was clear, or he thought it was. But there were questions, 1, 10, 100 of them. They wanted to pile over the end of his tongue, questions that had little or nothing to do with Kedsty. He saw nothing now but Mariette. She had begun to take down her hair. It fell about her in wet, shining masses. Kent had never seen anything like it. It hung to her face, her neck, her shoulders and arms, and shrouded her slender body to her hips, lovely in its confusion. Little drops of water glistened in it, like diamonds in the lamp glow, trickling down and dropping to the floor. It was like a glowing coat of velvety sable beaten by storm. Mariette ran her arms up through it, shaking it out in clouds, and a mist of rain leaped out from it, some of it striking Kent in the face. He forgot Fingers. He forgot Kedsty. His brain flamed only with the electrifying nearness of her. It was the thought of her that had inspired the greatest hope in him. It was his dreams of her, somewhere in the big river, that had given him his great courage to believe in the ultimate things. And now, time and space had taken a leap backward. She was not 400 or 500 miles north. There was no long quest ahead of him. She was here, within a few feet of him, tossing the wet from that glorious hair he had yearned to touch, brushing it out now, with her back toward him, in front of her mirror. And as he sat there, uttering no word, looking at her, the demands of the immense responsibility that had fallen upon him, and of the great fight that lay ahead, pounded within him with naked fists. Fingers had planned, she had executed. It was up to him to finish. He saw her, not as a creature to win, but as a priceless possession. Her fight had now become his fight. The rain was beating against the window near him. Out there was blackness, the river, the big world. His blood leaped with the old fighting fire. They were going tonight. They must be going tonight. Why should they wait? Why should they waste time under Kedsty's roof when freedom lay out there for the taking? He watched the swift movements of her hand, listened to the silken rustle of the brush as it smoothed out her long hair. Bewilderment, reason, desire for action fought inside him. Suddenly she faced him again. "It has just this moment occurred to me," she said, "that you have not said. Thank you." So suddenly that he startled her. He was at her side. He did not hesitate this time, as he had hesitated in his room at Cardigan's place. He caught her 2 hands in his, and with them he felt the soft, damp crush of her hair between his fingers. Words tumbled from his lips. He could not remember afterward all that he said. Her eyes widened. and they never for an instant left his own. Thank her. He told her what had happened to him, in the heart and soul of him, from the hour she had come to him at Cardigan's. He told her of dreams and plans, of his determination to find her again, after he had escaped, if it took him all his life. He told her of Mercer, of his discovery of her visit to Kim's Bayou, of his scheme to follow her down the 3 rivers, to seek for her at Fort Simpson, to follow her to the Valley of Silent Men, wherever it was. Thank her. He held her hands so tight they hurt, and his voice trembled under the cloud of her hair. A slow fire burned in Maurette Radisson's cheeks, but it did not show in her eyes. They looked at him so steadily, so unfalteringly, that his own face burned before he had finished what was in his mind to say, and he freed her hands and stepped back from her again. Forgive me for saying all that, he entreated, but it is true. You came to me there, at Cardigan's place, like something I would always dreamed about, but never expected to find. And you came to me again, at the cell, like, yes, I know how I came, she interrupted him. Through the mud and the rain, Mr. Kent, and it was so black I lost my way and was terrified to think that I might not find barracks. I was half an hour behind Mr. Finger's schedule. For that reason, I think Inspector Kedsty may return at any moment, and you must not talk so loud or so much. Lord, he breathed in a whisper, I have said a lot in a short time, have not I? But it is not 100th part what I want to get out of my system. I will not ask the million questions that want to be asked, but I must know why we are here, why I will come to Kedsty's. Why did not we make for the river? There could not be better night to get away. But it is not so good as 5th night from now will be, she said, resuming the task of drying her hair. On that night you may go to the river. Our plans were a little upset, you know, by Inspector Kedsty's change in the date on which you were to leave for Edmonton. Arrangements have been made so that on the 5th night you may leave safely. And you? I shall remain here. And then she added in a low voice that struck his heart cold, I shall remain to pay Kedsty the price which he will ask for what has happened tonight. Good God, he cried. Maurette. She turned on him swiftly. No, no. I do not mean that he will hurt me, she cried, a fierce little note in her voice. I would kill him before that. I am sorry I told you, but you must not question me. You shall not. She was trembling. He had never seen her excited like that before. And as she stood there before him, he knew that he was not afraid for her in the way that had flashed into his mind. She had not spoken empty words. She would fight. She would kill, if it was necessary to kill. And he saw her, all at once, as he had not seen her before. He remembered a painting which he had seen a long time ago in Montreal. It was L'Esprit de la Solitude, the spirit of the wild, painted by Conn, the picturesque French-Canadian friend of Lord Strathcona and Mount Royal, and genius of the far backwoods, who had drawn his inspiration from the heart of the wilderness itself, and that painting stood before him now, in flesh and blood, its crudeness gone, but the marvelous spirit it had breathed remaining, shrouded in her tumbled hair. Her lips a little parted, every line of her slender body vibrant with an emotion which seemed consuming her, her beautiful eyes aglow with its fire. He saw in her, as Con must have foreseen at another time, the soul of the great North itself. She seemed to him to breathe of the gods' country, far down the 3 rivers, of its almost savage fearlessness, its beauty, its sunshine, and its storm, its tragedy, its pathos, and its song. In her was the courage and the glory of that North he had seen, and now he felt these things, and the thrill of them swept over him like an inundation. He had heard her soft laugh. She had made fun of him when he thought he was dying. She had kissed him. She had fought for him. She had clung in terror to his hand when the lightning flashed, and now she stood with her little hands clenched in her hair, like a storm about to break. A moment ago she was so near that he had almost taken her in his arms. Now, in an instant, she had placed something so vast between them that he would not have dared to touch her hand or her hair. Like sun and cloud and wind, she changed, and for him each change added to the wonder of her. And now it was storm. He saw it in her eyes, her hands, her body. He felt the electrical nearness of it in those low-spoken, trembling words. "You shall not." The room seemed surcharged for a moment with impending shock, and then his physical eyes took in again the slimness of her, seized upon the alluring smallness of her, and the fact that he could have tossed her to the ceiling without great effort, and yet he saw her as one sees a goddess. "No, I will not ask you questions when you look at me like that," he said, finding his tongue. "I will not ask you what this price is that Kedsty may demand, because you are not going to pay it. If you will not go with me, I will not go. I would rather stay here and be hung. I am not asking you questions, so please do not shoot. But if you told me the truth, and you belong in the North, you are going back with me, or I am not going. I will not budge an inch." She drew a deep breath, as if something had greatly relieved her. Again, her violet eyes came out from the shadow into sunlight, and her trembling mouth suddenly broke into a smile. It was not apologetic. There was about it a quick and spontaneous gladness which she made no effort at all to conceal. "I never knew how pleasant it was to have someone who was willing to be hung for me. But you will go, and I will not go. There is not time to explain all about it just now, for Inspector Kedsty will be here very soon, and I must dry my hair and show you your hiding place, if you have to hide." She began to brush her hair again. In the mirror, Kent caught a glimpse of the smile still trembling on her lips. "I am not questioning you," he guarded himself again, "but if you could only understand how anxious I am to know where Kedsty is, how fingers found you, why you made us believe you were leaving the landing and then returned, and how badly I want to know something about you. I almost believe you would talk, A little while you are drying your hair. It was Mui, the old Indian, she said. It was he who found out in some way that I was here, and then Monsieur Fingers came himself one night when the inspector was away, got in through a window, and simply said that you had sent him when I was just about to shoot him. You see, I knew you were not going to die. Kedsty had told me that. I was going to help you in another way, if Monsieur Fingers had not come. Inspector Kedsty was over there tonight, at his cabin, when the thing happened down there. It was a part of Fingers' scheme to keep him out of the way. Suddenly, she grew rigid. The brush remained poised in her hair. Kent, too, heard the sound that she had heard. It was a loud tapping at one of the curtained windows, the tapping of some metallic object, and that window was 15 feet above the ground. With a little cry, the girl threw down her brush, ran to the window, and raised and lowered the curtain once. Then she turned to Kent, swiftly dividing her hair into thick strands and weaving them into a braid. "It is Mui," she cried. "Kedsty is coming." She caught his hand and hurried him toward the head of the bed, where 2 long curtains were strung on a wire. She drew these apart. Behind them were what seemed to Kent an innumerable number of feminine garments. "You must hide in them if you have to," she said, the excited little tremble in her voice again. "I do not think it will come to that, but if it does, you must. Bury yourself way back in them and keep quiet. If Kedsty finds you are here." She looked into his eyes, and it seemed to Kent that there was something which was very near to fear in them now. "If he should find you here, it would mean something terrible for me," she went on, her hands creeping to his arms. "I cannot tell you what it is now, but it would be worse than death. Will you promise to stay here, no matter what happens down there, no matter what you may hear? Will you, Mr. Kent?" "Not if you call me Mr. Kent," he said, something thickening in his throat. "Will you, James? Will you, no matter what happens, if I promise, when I come back, to kiss you?" Her hand slipped, almost caressingly, from his arms, and then she had turned swiftly and was gone through the partly open door, closing it after her before he could give his promise. Chapter 15. For a space he stood where she had left him, staring at the door through which she had gone. The nearness of her in those last few seconds of her presence, the caressing touch of her hands, what he had seen in her eyes, her promise to kiss him if he did not reveal himself, these things, and the thought of the splendid courage that must be inspiring her to face Kedsty now, made him blind even to the door and the wall at which he was apparently looking. He saw only her face as he had seen it in that last moment, her eyes, the tremble of her lips, and the fear which she had not quite hidden from him. She was afraid of Kedsty. He was sure of it, for she had not smiled. There was no flicker of humor in her eyes when she called him James, an intimate use of the names Jim and James in the far north. It was not facetiously that she had promised to kiss him. An almost tragic seriousness had possessed her, and it was that seriousness that thrilled him, that and the amazing frankness with which she had coupled the name James with the promise of her lips. Once before she had called him James. But it was Monsieur Jameson, and there had been a bit of taunting laughter in her voice. Jim or James meant nothing but James. He had heard mothers call little children that. In moments of endearment, he knew that wives and sweethearts used it in that same way. For Jim and James were not uncommon names up and down the three rivers, even among the half-breeds and French, and James was the closer and more intimate thing bred of it. His heart was thumping riotously as he went to the door and listened. A little while ago, when she faced him with flashing eyes, commanding him not to question her, he had felt an abyss under his feet. Now he was on a mountain, and he knew that no matter what he heard, unless it was her cry for help, he would not go down. She had not forbidden that. Through the crack he could see a dim glow of light in the lower hall, but he heard no sound, and it occurred to him that old Moy could still run swiftly, and that it might be some time before Kedsty would arrive. As he waited, he looked about the room. His first impression was that Mamet must have lived in it for a long time. It was a woman's room, without the newness of sudden and unpremeditated occupancy. He knew that formerly it had been Kedsty's room, but nothing of Kedsty remained in it now. And then, as his wondering eyes beheld the miracle, a number of things struck him with amazing significance. He no longer doubted that Maret Radisson was of the far Northland. His faith in that was absolute. If there had been a last question in his mind, it was wiped away because she called him James. Yet this room seemed to give the lie to his faith. Fascinated by his discovery of things, he drew away from the door and stood over the dressing table in front of the mirror. Maret had not prepared the room for him, and her possessions were there. It did not strike him as sacrilege to look at them, the many intimate little things that are mysteriously used in the process of a lady's toilette. It was their number and variety that astounded him. He might have expected them in the boudoir of the Governor-General's daughter at Ottawa, but not here, and much less farther north. What he saw was of exquisite material and workmanship, and then, as if attracted by a magnet, his eyes were drawn to something else. It was a row of shoes, neatly and carefully arranged on the floor at one side of the dressing table. He stared at them, astounded. Never had he seen such an array of feminine footwear, intended for the same pair of feet, and it was not northern footwear. Every individual little beauty in that amazing row stood on a high heel. Their variety was something to which he had long been a stranger. There were buttoned boots, laced boots, brown boots, black boots, and white boots, with dangerously high and fragile-looking heels. There were dainty little white kid slippers, slippers with bows, slippers with cut steel buckles, and slippers with dainty ribbon ties. There were high-heeled Oxfords and high-heeled patent leather bumps. He gasped. He reached over, moved by an automatic sort of impulse, and took a satiny little pump in his hand. The size of it gave him a decidedly pleasant mental shock, and, beginning to feel like one prying into a sleeper's secrets, he looked inside it. The size was there, number 3, and it had come from Favre's in Montreal. One after another he looked inside half a dozen others, and all of them had come from Favre's in Montreal. The little shoes, more than all else that he had seen, or that had happened, sent a question pounding through his brain. Who was Maret Radisson? And that question was followed by other questions, until they tumbled over one another in his head. If she was from Montreal, why was she going north? If she belonged in the north, if she was a part of it, why was she taking all of this apparently worthless footwear with her? Why had she come to Athabasca Landing? What was she to Kedsty? Why was she hiding under his roof? Why? He stopped himself, trying to find some one answer in all that chaos of questions. It was impossible for him to take his eyes from the shoes. A thought seized him. Ludicrously he dropped upon his knees in front of the row, and with a face growing hotter each moment, examined them all. But he wanted to know. And the discovery he made was that most of the footwear had been worn, some of it so slightly, however, that the impression of the foot was barely visible. He rose to his feet and continued his inquiry. Of course, she had expected him to look about. One could not help seeing, unless one were blind. He would have cut off a hand before opening one of the dressing table drawers. But Marette herself had told him to hide behind the curtains if it became necessary, and it was an excusable caution for him to look behind those curtains now, to see what sort of hiding place he had. He returned to the door first and listened. There was still no sound from below. Then he drew the curtains apart, as Marette had drawn them, only he looked longer. He would tell her about it when she returned, if the act needed an apology. His impression was a man's impression. What he saw was a billowing, filmy mass of soft stuff, and out of it there greeted him the faintest possible scent of lilac sachet powder. He closed the curtains with a deep breath of utter joy and of consternation. The two emotions were a jumble to him. The shoes, all that mass of soft stuff behind the curtains, were exquisitely feminine. The breath of perfume had come to him straight out of a woman's soul. There was seduction and witchery to it. He saw Marette, an enrapturing vision of loveliness, floating before his eyes, in that sacred and mysterious vestment, of which he had stolen a half-frightened glimpse. In white, the white, cobwebby thing of laces and embroidery that had hung straight before his eyes. In white, with her glorious black hair, her violet eyes, and then it was that the incongruity of the thing, the almost sheer impossibility of it, clashed in upon his vision. Yet his faith was not shaken. Marette Radisson was of the north. He could not disbelieve that, even in the face of these amazing things that confronted him. Suddenly he heard a sound that was like the explosion of a gun. Under his feet it was the opening and closing of the hall door, but mostly the closing. The slam of it shook the house and rattled the glass in the windows. Kedsty had returned, and he was in a rage. Kent extinguished the light so that the room was in darkness. Then he went to the door. He could hear the quick, heavy tread of Kedsty's feet. After that came the closing of a second door, followed by the rumble of Kedsty's voice. Kent was disappointed. The inspector of police and Marette were in a room too far distant for him to distinguish what was said, but he knew that Kedsty had returned to barracks and had discovered what had happened there. After an interval, his voice was a steady rumble. It rose higher. He heard the crash of the chair. Then the voice ceased, and after it came the tramping of Kedsty's feet. Not once did he catch the sound of Marette's voice, but he was sure that in the interval of silence she was talking. Then Ketsty's voice broke forth more furiously than before. Kent's fingers dug into the sill of the door. Each moment added to his conviction that Marette was in danger. It was not physical violence he feared. He did not believe Ketsty capable of perpetrating that upon a woman. It was fear that he would take her to barracks. The fact that Marette had told him there was a powerful reason Ketsty would not do this failed to assure him, for she had also told him that Ketsty would kill her if he dared. He held himself in readiness at a cry from her or the first move on Ketsty's part to take her from the bungalow. He would give battle in spite of Marette's warning. He almost hoped one of these two things would happen. As he stood there, listening, waiting, the thought became almost a prayer. He had Pelle's revolver. Within 20 seconds, he could have Ketsty looking down the barrel of it. The night was ideal for escape. Within half an hour, they would be on the river. They could even load up with provisions from Ketsty's place. He opened the door a little more, scarcely making an effort to combat the impulse that dragged him out. Marette must be in danger, or she would not have confessed to him that she was in the house of a man who would like to see her dead. Why she was there did not interest him deeply now. It was the fact of the moment that was moving him swiftly toward action. The door below opened again, and Kent's body grew rigid. He heard Ketsty charging through the lower hall like a mad bull. The outer door opened, slammed shut, and he was gone. Kent drew back into the darkness of his room. It was some moments before he heard Marette coming slowly up the stairs. She seemed to be groping her way, though there was a dim illumination out there. Then she came through the door into the blackness of her room. "James," she whispered. He went to her. Her hands reached out, and again they rested on his arms. You did not come down the stair? No, you did not hear?" I heard no words, only Ketsty's voice. It seemed to him that her voice, when she spoke again, trembled with an immeasurable relief. "You were good, James. I am glad." In that darkness he could not see. Yet something reached into him, thrilling him, quickening his pulse. With a thing to which his eyes were blind, he bent down. He found her lips upturned, offering him the sweetness of the kiss, which was to be his reward. And as he felt their warmth upon his own, he felt also the slightest pressure of her hands upon his arms. "He is gone. We will light the lamp again," she said then. And now the valley stands quiet once more, but this quiet feels earned. What has unfolded tonight has not only moved the story forward, it has clarified it. Some silences protect, some silences conceal, and some prepare. If you are still awake, notice how steady your breathing has become, how much lighter your thoughts feel. The wilderness has revealed something important, but not everything, not yet, because the final movement of any story does not arrive with force. It arrives with certainty, and the next part, that certainty will settle. The last unanswered tension will find its direction. The last shadow will find its shape. The valley does not hurry endings. It allows them to arrive naturally. And when they do, they feel inevitable. But for now, let inevitability rest. Let the questions dissolve. Let the river carry them away. There is nothing you need to hold on to, nothing you need to anticipate. The final chapter will wait. It always does. So breathe slowly. Let your body grow heavy. Let the silence become a dream. And when you return, the valley will offer its last quiet truth. Sleep deeply, and I will meet you again, where silence finds its ending.